I've already started working on the next one, so
Good.
didn't take long. So chapter 9 was all about physical labor. And she doesn't refer to the book Chop Wood, Carry Water. We talked about that a little bit yesterday about, couldn't remember who the author was, but some Buddhist author. But she starts out, talking about this big ice storm and power outage and thinking, oh, this is kind of cool. And then realizes that she's got more to do than just think about it being kind of cool. She has to care for herself in ways that without electricity is difficult, but she also has to care for all these animals that she's got out there, and different kind of chopping through ice for the water. Everywhere I turned, she writes, the darkness exposed my helplessness. And how hard it is for those of us who are so accustomed to being able to.
Gary, would you mind going to slideshow, because it's hard to read. We're not
I didn't know that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's all right. What happened when I originally set this up, my external screen wasn't working, so I had to shut it off and then plug some other things in. So I think in the midst of that, it got a little wonky. So
yeah, we can read it now.
There we go. Yep. So thank you for telling me. Anyway, just how hard it is for us to deal with not having power. Forget the internet. It's just power in general. Not being able to have it. My daughter was at work. She works at King Soopers here. Karen knows which King Soopers is, Bellevue and Yosemite. And there was a power outage this morning. And I saw it on Nextdoor, but I didn't know that it was in that neighborhood. She said that the power was out at King Soopers for several hours. And, and she said not only was it really difficult for the associates, but it was really difficult for the customers. Now, what do you do in a grocery store when there's no power? Do you just go in and then leave because you can't see anything? But then the cash registers don't work. I mean, there's no point in being there, so it was really funny, so.
A little bit surprised in that case. King Soopers doesn't have a backup generator, if nothing else, just for the freezer cabinets and the things that need to be refrigerated.
Yeah, I didn't ask her about any of that, but that makes sense. I would be surprised too. But then she does, Taylor does this wonderful thing that she seems to have a knack for that I certainly do not have. On day 3, I decided a power outage would make a great spiritual practice. And I don't see hardship as, oh golly, what a great spiritual practice, or something like that. It
sounds like lemons and lemonade, right?
Yeah. I just don't get that. It would be great. And then, so she had to figure out how to live as most people in the world live, preoccupied with survival. And that came up in the conversation yesterday about what happens when it's really visceral, that you can't get above Maslow's first level of the hierarchy of needs and all of that. Everything is food, water, shelter. She had shelter, but it wasn't quite what she wanted. How do you keep warm? Amazing. And forced to engage the brute requirements of staying alive, something we don't have to deal with. And then she makes that really nice transition into the grace of physical labor. And then she has this wonderful sort of meditation on digging potatoes, which with an 11-year-old, and how do you get somebody who's tied to their devices to go out and then show them what the world is like, what Earth is like, and then all of a sudden they don't want to play with the devices, they want to dig potatoes. And what a great metaphor that is for how do we get beyond ourselves and really go into the potato digging business, metaphorically.
Yeah, I don't know why it just came to me that it reminds me of a song in the year 2525 or whatever. I don't know the real name of it.
Yeah.
Where pretty soon you won't need your arms, you won't need your legs, you know, or anything else. Everything will be provided. And even in my lifetime, if I think back, you know, before the remote control days and obviously computers and other things, it was quite a bit different, for sure.
Yeah.
And who knows what's going to be 100, 200, 300 years from now.
Yeah. The old days of having to get up from the couch and go over and turn the knob, click, 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 and then adjust the rabbit ears or whatever to get it. You know, we had 4 channels when I was growing up. I remember when we ended up with the 5th channel, but it was 3 and a UHF channel. And the UHF never came in right. All of those kinds of things. But how.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when we did not have a TV. And the first one we had was a 12-inch round TV. And black and white, of course. But that was the early cathode ray tube TV, you know. And we were just amazed. Milton Berle right there in person, you know.
Well, my dad, just on that point, you know, my dad came back from the war and went to school and got an electrical engineering degree, and then went to work for a radio station in Salem, Oregon, was a disc jockey for a while, and then and then TV came out, and he went to work for the NBC affiliate in Portland. So he worked basically with TV from the time TV was TV.
Yeah.
And I have really early memories, not so much of our own TV, but I do have memories of that, but of his workshop where he would fix everybody else's TVs in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, he knew which tubes to pull out and which ones to push in, and which condensers and which capacitors and which resistors to change. And we were all really glad when after color TV came in, and the neighbors would bring in their broken color TVs, because then we could look at color TV while he was fixing. You know, so anyway, but that's sort of moving on a long tangent here. So there's no substitute for earthiness. From dust we came, and to dust we shall return. And I really liked her take on Adam and Adamah. Adamah, the Hebrew word for earth, and Adam from that. And God created earthlings. And I'm trying to remember yesterday, and I couldn't do it, and I forgot to look on my shelf. But there was an Episcopalian author, and it's not Ursula Le Guin. I just can't remember her name, but she did a similar thing. She called that God created dusty from the dust. Rather than earthling from the earth, it was dusty from the dust, which I really liked. And then God planted a garden, and, you know, going back to the potatoes and all of that. And our first divine job was to till the earth and keep it. And I had never thought about the fact that tilling was our job before the curse. I just never thought about that.
No, I didn't either.
And I really sort of like that. But if you can't be outside and digging potatoes, then housework is a reliable path to the rudiments of life. And she talks about cleaning windows and being able to see more clearly, and the sun shining through better, and all of that sort of stuff. And then that whole thing about cleaning toilets. Again, the earthiness of it all.
You just made it sound so much more attractive than it really is.
It's because she's a good writer.
I know. And I remember my days of volunteering at San Francisco Center, which I did for almost 4 years, one day a month. And this was back in my working life. And I actually had a boss who was an Episcopalian. And I had enough vacation where I was going to take off a day a month when I went down there. And he said, no, that's community work. Just go ahead and you don't have to take vacation. So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, there was a lot of things we did there that I really wasn't into that much. But I never left there. I always dreaded going down there. Not dreaded, but I didn't enjoy the trip down. But I can tell you that there was very seldom a time I spent a day there that I didn't come back thinking that I had seen Jesus in at least one person.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool.
Yeah. We can come back to that in a minute. Just finish this up because we're right towards the end of this chapter. Life offers no shortage of opportunities to engage physical labor. But how do you see that as a spiritual practice? I think that's the kicker. However the openings come to you, they offer you the chance to bear the reality of the universe in your flesh like a thorn. Great image. I mentioned yesterday, and I'll shut up and let Karen talk here, that, and I'd forgotten about this until I read this chapter, that one of the jobs I had probably in high school, I spent a summer as a kind of a custodian at the elementary school that I'd grown up doing. And during the summer, that meant, mowing the lawn and refinishing the basketball court and all of those kinds of things. And then I stayed on for the fall, and the school had turned into a junior high by then. It was no longer an elementary school. It had become a junior high. And of course, I was the evening custodian, one of the evening custodians, which meant I got to clean the bathrooms. That was disgusting. You got all these adolescents, and it was just disgusting. And I'd forgotten all about that until she brought her experience up. And I thought, I wasn't that disgusting when I was in junior high, was I? So, what else did you all get from this chapter?
I will just add that I too cleaned toilets, not at St. Francis. I did the clothing room at St. Francis, but I cleaned the toilets at St. Clair's. And I just volunteered to do it because nobody would do it. It kind of made me laugh in the book. She said, I guess I got elected to do it because I was clergy. I don't remember any of the clergy doing it at St. Clair's. But I just have this high tolerance for stuff like that. I don't know what it is, but I said, I will do it. And I continued to I did it for several years. And wow. I did it, Tuesday night, I would leave my job and go to St. Clair's and wait around and then clean the toilets. And I do remember gagging a couple times. I didn't actually throw up, but I did gag. So if I had a pretty high tolerance for that kind of stuff, it was pretty bad if even I was gagging at times. But I kind of liked what she made it into, she did it apparently one time or a couple times, and she sort of turned it into this devotion, I guess, to the saints. But when I did it, I sort of had the same sort of frame of mind. I sort of turned it into a ritual, a cleaning ritual, and this idea that, people deserve, no matter who you are, you deserve a clean toilet. That's like the bottom line in the world. Of course, they deserve a place to sleep too, and some of them had that and some of them didn't. But I kind of always approached it in sort of a cleaning, ritualistic type thing, with meaning that we're giving them just the basic thing you could give a human being, and that's a clean place to pee or poop, So right. I kind of had the same sort of reaction as you guys, and then she had as well. But
go ahead.
The one thing I really liked that she was talking about losing power. And she said, when the power goes on, we should have a service in the prayer book for occasions such as these. And that's so perfect. How many times have you done that? Just these little things like that. And you're just like thinking of some kind of prayer to offer at that time. So I like that.
I don't know if you read ahead and read to the end of the book, which I just did a couple of hours ago. And in the chapter on benedictions, she talks about being an Episcopalian. She says, we bless anything, you know,
Exactly,
and so it would sort of fit into that, the book of occasional services, here's the blessing for power coming back on. I could just see us writing that. But yeah, that was pretty good. I enjoyed that too.
You've probably heard this from Cal Schofield before, but when he'll tell you about a house blessing he did, and he'll say, and they had 3 toilets. He said, so I blessed 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. Heard that joke more than once from him, but anyway, I didn't know about honorable work from Buddhism. Isn't that the way they put it? I think.
Yeah. Right livelihood.
Right livelihood. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, I'm not sure how. I mean, I sort of agree with it, but I'm not sure how that is something spiritual. If it is, I don't know Buddhism, so. But I just hadn't heard that before, even though I read the book many years ago. It didn't stick. And I'm thinking, well, how does that compare to faith without works is dead? But that, in that case, that's more doing for others, not just providing for yourself and your family.
Well, I think, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think, in Buddhism, the Noble Eightfold Path, of which right livelihood is one of the eightfold things, is what is the path to carry you further in your spiritual development. And if you're spending time, I'm not, selling drugs, that's not right livelihood. That's not advancing you or anybody along the path, but it's different than working to earn something. As I'm going to stand up here and get this book out of my cupboard. And I've used this before. I've said this before. Frederick Buechner, this author, I think he's a Methodist, a really, really great thinker, wrote this book called Wishful Thinking, A Seeker's ABC. And he talks about vocation. And I think that this is kind of what Taylor's getting at, that's different than working to earn your salvation. Buechner defines vocation as the kind of work God usually calls you to, as the kind of work that you most need to do and that the world most needs having done. And so he says, if you really get a kick out of your work, you've presumably met requirement A. But if your work is writing cigarette ads, the chances are you've missed requirement B, because the world doesn't really need cigarette ads. On the other hand, if your work is being a doctor in a leper colony, you've probably met requirement B, but if most of the time you're bored and depressed, the chances are you've not only bypassed A, but probably aren't helping your patients much either. And so I think that, that's that thing about right livelihood would be working in a leper colony, maybe, as opposed to writing cigarette ads. But then there are the other the 7 parts of the Eightfold Path that would address some of this other stuff. Does that make sense, Whit?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes, it does.
Yeah,
Uh,
and then he ends this little thing. He says, neither the hair shirt nor the soft berth, berth, will do. The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet.
yeah,
So, so that I think that's very much different than sort of you got to work to make God love you.
right.
Uh, yeah.
Well, and I don't necessarily agree with um, where that's saying faith without work is dead. That comes from Timothy, I think, one of those books. James, thank you. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that. I believe because through God's grace we're saved, and that. But you should do what what Christ modeled for us to do, which is love your neighbor as yourself. We talked about that in an early chapter. That's a big. That's quite a huge challenge, but anyway, that's what as Christians we try to work toward. I think I mentioned it might have been last week, might have been last week. I don't know. The book. I finally remembered the name of the book I was talking about by Robert Fury. The name of it was Called by Name. And then the subtitle was Finding Your Unique Purpose in Life.
Okay.
And it was, he might have even quoted Buechner, or I've heard what you read from Buechner before. That what Buechner said is kind of utopia, I think. And I'm not sure any of us can quite get there as far as, truly finding something that you're so excited about, and also that people need and appreciate, or that does good, relieves suffering, whatever. And anyway, that I think I mentioned I went through that whole book, and after my retirement from the telephone business, I started my own handyman business, and to me that was quite rewarding, because I was actually helping people. There was a need, and I was able to help out most of the time. So to me, that was more rewarding than some of the things I did in my professional career.
I understand that. Karen, thoughts?
I would just say that vocation doesn't necessarily mean a paying job either. I mean, they talk of vocation as being a Christian mystery about what you do with your life, and that means all sorts of things. But what I was going to also say about her, I just found the passage. I was really fascinated with her exploration of decomposition. In fact, foreseeing your own decomposition, of course, we do that on Ash Wednesday every year. And I am always fascinated on Ash Wednesday. I mean, people may think it's morbid. I think it's a really, it's obviously a very solemn and serious day. But I also am sort of fascinated by that whole thing of contemplating your own decomposition. And she just puts it in a wonderful sort of naturalistic way that really lends itself to thinking about it. So
Yeah, there is. I'm trying to remember. I don't think it's just limited to Buddhism, but I know in Buddhism, in the monastic traditions in Buddhism, there is a practice of sitting with a corpse as it decomposes. And I don't think that it's really aimed at making you consider your own mortality as much as it is to make you recognize that everything will change. Whatever is a rising thing is a decaying thing. It's just this recognition that nothing is permanent. And so I agree. She talks about that, and then I've heard similar stories in the Western Christian monastic tradition about being down in the ossuarium where all of the bones are, and saying, this is where you will be. But yeah, it's pretty profound. And
yeah, she definitely talks about this decomposition. I mean, it's only kind of a paragraph or two, but she kind of gets to the heart of the matter and talking about it as a cycle, and you must touch the stuff that bones are made of and all this sort of thing. And that, I don't know, it just sort of echoes to me of that whole religious aspect, because for me, it's not just thinking about your own mortality on Ash Wednesday, but it's also thinking about this cycle, and nothing is as permanent as this cycle of life and death and Christianity and everything that's God and infinity and everything that's mixed up in this equation. I don't want to go on about it, but it just really struck me. I thought, yeah, that's kind of, she's articulated sort of what I have felt at that time of year.
uh-huh. Uh-huh. These were the questions that I threw out. We don't have to talk about them. We can go on to chapter 10. But I've certainly experienced, as I said, the dirt and sweat. Being a janitor was one of those. And I can't remember thinking about it as being a curse or a blessing. But I mentioned yesterday morning that, and I may have mentioned this to either one of you before, is that when I was in college, I earned money during the summer by being on the paint crew at the college. And so I was painting dorm rooms, and, that had its own sort of interesting stuff going on, but, in common rooms and window frames and stuff like that. So it wasn't just dorm rooms. But what I always found is, and this was where I would say it was a blessing, is that at the end, I could see the results of the work that I did. And now this is beautiful when before it wasn't. And so I have taken many vacations from work, and I will continue to do it, where my job has been to paint the house. And no, it's not the same as going and standing in the middle of a river and fishing, but there's this great sense of satisfaction when you're done, to see that you took something that was not necessarily ugly, but not as beautiful as it could be. And then it's fresh and clean and new and full of possibility again. And you can sort of redecorate around it and say, this is a new thing. So I've always loved that sort of home repair side of physical labor as a blessing. And I'm just grateful I learned so much of it from really good people back when I was in college.
Well, I've had my share of the first part of that question, but I will answer. Yes, and I've done a lot of physical labor, a lot of stuff with my hands, because I I like doing stuff with my hands. But did you consider it a curse or a blessing? Yes, both. I mean, at different times, some things were really a blessing, and other times it was really a curse. Couldn't wait to get through it. So, been on both sides of that equation.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the number of extra trips to Home Depot or Lowe's in the process of replacing a disposal.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't have the right this. I gotta go back. Oh, I broke this. Oh yeah, this is supposed to be a 30-minute procedure that stretches out to 4 hours, and all
Been there,
sorts of.
done that.
Yeah, unreligious words are uttered.
Or as my dad would say, he was going to start reciting a Sunday school lesson, taking God's name in vain. What he was referring to when something would go wrong,
Yep.
Make me recite my Sunday school lesson.
So let's move on to chapter 10, this feeling pain or breakthrough. And even though I knew this, it was great for her to sort of begin by situating all religions, or many religions, and their relationship to suffering. And like I say, I'd seen that before, and I just love the fact that she started there. Pain is provocative. It pushes people to the edge. It begs for change. I mean, that's what we want, give me the Advil. or let me put my foot up on a pillow so that the throbbing will stop. It begs for change. But then again, just like in the last chapter, how can something as non-negotiable as pain serve as a spiritual practice? I'm going to take this awful thing and turn it into a spiritual practice. Again, great gift there. I wonder if she does that right at the moment, or if she sort of looks at this sort of a long way later and says, I could have done this if I would have been wise. Pain makes theologians of us all. A fast tour to a no frills encounter with the holy. Great line.
That reminds me of the saying, there's no atheist in foxholes.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Her thing about needles, I understand. I'm not a big fan of needles. I'm actually kind of jealous of my son, who for 8 or 9 years, maybe 10 years now, has gone in at least once a month for an allergy shot. And, so needles for him aren't a big deal. The allergies are a big deal. Needles are not a big deal. And, I go in for my annual flu shot and all those kinds of things, but I even to have blood drawn, I look the other way. I don't want to watch that needle. I don't want to watch any of it. I remember when I was a kid, we went to my dentist. His name was Dr. Shoemaker, and I thought, this is an odd name for a dentist.
Could have been a cobbler, yeah.
Yeah, you remember those big lamps that they would, push down in your face, the two things on either side. He had a mirror stuck right between the two of them so you could see whatever he was doing. And so I just remember looking and watching that needle go in. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to shut my eyes. And that was something else. And then she talks about the difference between pain and suffering. And I thought that was a really helpful distinction, that they can be very, very different experiences. And I love the sort of the suffering of an AIDS patient dying alone is, there's the pain, but then there's that suffering of being rejected by everybody, and except maybe the physicians whose job it is to do something, but your parents or friends, or and what that suffering is like. And then, of course, as I mentioned yesterday, I think that her reflection on Job is one of the best ones I've ever seen. Just all, some of it clearly I thought, if God's all powerful and all good, then why do terrible things happen to good people? I mean, that's Job, right? And Rabbi Kushner and all of that. But her observation about Job's poetry, and his fury and his unwillingness to stop, and just sort of rage against the dying of the light. That poem was a Robert Frost or whoever, when Kennedy died. And Job believed he knew God, but when everything fell apart, so did his sense of reality, and how we use God to help construct reality. And then when that doesn't work anymore, God doesn't work the way we work, is anything left to be real? Boy, did I hear that a lot when I was dealing with parents of kids at DU who died either by accident or by suicide. Their world didn't work anymore. Furious poetry. This is how faith looks: a blunt refusal to stop speaking into the divine silence. I don't think that she would be upset if I mentioned this, but in talking with Audrey Fisher the last couple of days after Dawn's death, her the rawness of it and how it reflects a little bit of speaking into the divine silence. Why did this happen? How did it happen so quickly? All of those kinds of things. Yeah, it was fascinating to read this chapter in the midst of what was going on with Don and Audrey.
Well, that wasn't a long illness, was it?
Well, he'd been failing for a long time, and he had chronic fatigue syndrome, but there were some other things that may or may not have been related to that. But towards the end, he couldn't eat anything because it just went straight into his lungs. I mean, the food never went all the way down. The esophagus and all of those other kinds of things, which doesn't sound to me like chronic fatigue at all. It sounds like something else. But so he began to fail really fairly quickly in the last 8 or 10 months. But the chronic fatigue was longer than that. And he'd been very, if you'd ever seen him, and Karen went to the early service often enough that she would see him sort of really very frail coming in. And I saw the picture that they're going to use on the brochure for the funeral. And this was not I never knew that Dawn.
Right.
This was a very vital Dawn.
Yeah.
That's in the picture. She goes on to say that, Job wants to know why me, and God doesn't give a single answer, but asks 43 unanswerable questions. She counted them all up. I was very impressed with that. But then she observes that, these unanswerable questions seem to satisfy Job. Is that his sense of reality was changed, I guess, and that he was put back into his place. And once you're back into your place, you just sort of say, well, that's the way it is. And there isn't going to be an answer. And so just deal with it. I don't know if that's kind of what she was getting at, but that was sort of what I heard. And I don't like asking the question of why bad things happen to good people. We get asked that question all the time. I liked her answer is different. She says the real question is when. My take is the real question, or for me, the question is what next? So both her answer and my answer sort of recognize that it's going to happen, but what's the next thing that's going to go on? And then how to help: generosity, rituals, paying attention. Yeah. I guess all of those sort of validate the experience. Whatever else it does, pain offers an experience of being human that is as elemental as anything, an available antidote to unreality. And maybe that was where Job was. Even though he was righteous, he was living in an unreal world, or an unreal world that was created or sustained by his 3 friends who were trying with a really bad toolbox. And then for those willing to stay away, maybe that's supposed to be awake. Pain remains a reliable altar in the world, place to discover that life can be as full of meaning as it is as full of hurt. Yeah. So your thoughts on reading this chapter? You've heard mine. What was powerful to you?
Well, I'd like to go back to your first bullet, which is most of the world's religions grew out of suffering, or many grew out of suffering. I think I read that and I understand where she's coming from, but I believe most of the world's religion came out of death. And what I mean by that is it's, none of us are going to get out of this life alive. And it's the human condition that wants more meaning, wants more life, if you will, life after death, that kind of thing. Now, I'm not a trained theologian, so this is just my opinion, but I don't know that I totally agree with her that it came out of suffering. I think suffering is part of dying, in that your, life is a terminal illness, because, we all die slowly in different ways, so to speak, just age, degeneration, whatever. And so I just would like to know what you guys' thoughts are. I think that seem to me like religions generally grow out of the need for more.
Karen?
Are you muted?
No. Karen, you have any thoughts? Okay.
No, I mean, I can see all sides to that. I think she's saying this to reference it to the pain chapter is sort of how I read it. It's not pain, suffering is not definitive of religion, but there's a commonality among all the religions, is what I think she's saying.
Yeah, I think you're pointing in the right direction, is that historically, although nobody would think about it in quite this way, is that religions struggle to answer unanswerable questions. And, and so the one unanswerable question, at least for a long time, is why do people die? And well, it could be because the rhinoceros got to them before they got away. They weren't fast enough. But why can't they get up? But I think the other thing is the pain of loss. Why are we so attached to this? Why do we feel it so much when somebody does die? That's suffering in and of itself. And again, as I've been with Audrey the last few days, she says this is just unbearable. As she put it, to lose her best friend and her husband and her partner and all of that, in a very quick time. Yesterday, she said that, he died last Thursday, and the previous Sunday, I think they'd had a birthday party for somebody, and he was there. Somebody in the family, I can't remember exactly who it was, and he was there, sitting there, and she said, who would have thought within 4 days he'd be gone?
Yeah.
And so there's that pain, there's that suffering. And the Buddhism, and she mentions this, that the Buddha was brought up very, very sheltered, and until he got out, he'd never seen anything that was suffering, or even didn't know anything about death. And so how do you make sense of that? You read the Old Testament, the Jews are consistently trying to make sense about, why is all this happening to us? Why are the Assyrians overrunning us? Why are the Babylonians overrunning? Well, it's because you didn't live right, is one answer. Well, maybe not. Job answers it in a different way. Christianity is, why did the innocent suffer? So it is there. These are big questions that religions try to answer, and a lot of times they are around questions of suffering. If you think about the curse, in Genesis, it does answer the question of whether you like it or not. It does answer the question of why childbearing hurts. Whether you like the answer or not, there is toil and there's sweat. Why does it hurt to dig potatoes if you're I mean those things are there, and I think that's what she may be pointing to, is that this effort to answer those larger questions.
Okay.
I mean, similarly, is why are we here? Going back to a sermon I preached a couple of weeks ago. Well, God was lonely and wanted somebody to keep company. I mean, that's an answer. Is it the right? I don't know, but it is an attempt to answer the question of why are we here, and what's our purpose. Unfortunately, from my standpoint, Scripture says that our purpose is to help other people achieve their potential and live as good lives as they can in this brief time that we have. And why do we have such a brief time? Don't know.
Well, it's longer than a dog and shorter than, sequoias. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. Were there questions with this one?
Yep. Do you have more mental pain or physical pain? What's the greatest physical pain you've encountered? Boy, I can talk about that one if you want. Mental pain you've encountered.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a big set of questions.
Yep, that is a lot.
Want to attack either of those or address
Well,
less violently?
My first reaction was I haven't really had any mental pain that I can relate to or that I can really think about that was, real prevalent. And then I immediately thought, well, I've had a lot of physical pain, just injuries and first one thing another, but really not too much of that. But going back to the mental pain, I guess it wasn't really pain, but the hardest mental struggle I had was giving up alcohol. Having come from, well, two large families, but on my mother's side, she had 6 brothers, and her father was an alcoholic, and several of the boys were my uncles. And I know that alcoholism isn't genetic, but the propensity to consume is, and therefore I was well on that path. And then in 1983, I got sick with bronchitis that I couldn't shake. Doctor put me on antibiotics, and I read on the label, don't take with alcohol. I thought, well, they'll still work. And after going through a course of antibiotics and then not getting any better, I thought, okay, well, I can. He gave me another round of antibiotics. I thought, okay, I could be cool for a couple of weeks. And lo and behold, I got better. And I thought, well, I wonder how long I could keep doing this. And, 2 weeks led to 3 weeks, led to a month, led to 2 months, And that was 1993. I haven't had an alcoholic beverage since. And so I guess, I don't know if it's mental pain, but it was certainly a struggle. And so that's what I'll say about that first question. Karen?
Yeah, I thought this chapter was kind of, I mean, it was kind of all over the place for me. I have to go back and reread it because I had read this a long time ago and then I just kind of read it quickly for this class. But the weird thing is I have a really high tolerance for pain too, as well as cleaning toilets. So I swear, like after surgery, I'm the one, Tylenol's fine, no complaints. Just been really, really lucky. I mean, I will just say that I've been lucky that I haven't been in any sort of violent situation that would cause pain. So that's good. Kind of for me, what I really took from this chapter was when being with people at the end of their life or being with people in pain. And I seem to be able to do that too. I know it's really hard for some people to be around a person who's dying or be there when the person is dying, but I have. And I find it just a very natural process unless there's some violence involved, and it wasn't in any of the cases I was involved in. So I sort of appreciated what she was talking about, these different forms. You go into different forms of communication when someone can't speak or they're not fully there. So it's, and I feel very privileged to have been like with my brothers when my mother was dying. I mean, it's a very touching moment, if the person's at the end, elderly at the end of their life, it's a natural passing type thing. So, but I appreciate what you're saying, Whit. I know anytime you give up something in your life, there's, it's just, it's a different, you're on a different path. So, yeah, I can understand that. I'm glad you decided to do that. And
Yeah, I was never diagnosed as an alcoholic, but I read enough and I'd seen enough where I knew that I need to either make a change or I wouldn't be living too much longer. And I think if I, through the grace of God, if I didn't, I probably wouldn't be here now. My sister, older sister, developed type 2 diabetes, and she basically drank herself to death at 70. She was 7.5 years older than me. And what was worse is her son was type 1 diabetic. My only nephew. And he died at 40. And he could not stop drinking. Yeah, it was really sad. And he was such a great kid. Graduated from Rice University, very bright, great future ahead of him. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely a form of mental pain for sure.
Yeah. One of the things, and I'm not going to take the last word here, but we're getting close to winding down. But one of the things that I really appreciated, and I'm thinking about you, Whit, is the pain or the suffering that parents feel when their kids suffer. Both of my kids have had issues that were not of their making. And, just, you can't do anything about it. you just can't. And how hard that is to work through. I remember, and I'll stop here, but talking to therapists, I don't know, within the last year and a half, and saying, I really wish that my kids had been able to grow up without this going on, because I didn't have to do it. And, that was not, those were not my issues, but they were theirs, and how hard that is. And, so anyway, and I know that I suspect that that's something that you've hit once or twice with dealing with Sharon's situation. And,
Right.
it's just really hard.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
Any other last thoughts for the evening? Well, I would have thought that I would have been able to, I should have remembered to change this slide. The last two chapters are chapters 11 and 12, not 11 and 10. But I read both of these this afternoon, and they're really, really good. And made me very sad that we'll be coming to the conclusion of this discussion. But that's for me to repeat next week. But that's what we'll be doing, chapters 11 and 12. And again, thank you both and for engaging in this. It's been a gift, I trust, to everybody who's been involved, whether they've been here online regularly or they've been in the space regularly.
I've really enjoyed going back to the book again and not just reading it, but being able to have the dialogue that we've had. And I appreciate you accommodating those of us that aren't there in person on Sunday.
Yeah, well, well, I won't say we got to do it. I'm glad to do it. It's a different conversation this way than it is in the room. It's not better or worse. It's just different and equally as valuable. So thank you all. We'll see you soon. I'll see Karen tomorrow. And I'll see you soon enough, Whit.
Okay.
Appreciate you both. Have a good night.
Okay. Night, night.
Good night.